Hey YouTube, this is Marcus again. We got some automotive repair we're going to do today. Last night my mom called me while she was on her way to work, and the cooler line on her transmission cooler had popped out because there's just a little plastic clip that holds it in place, and dumped all of her transmission fluid on the ground. She was able to coast the vehicle to a stop, and hopefully it didn't do too much damage. She didn't get very far down the road before she stopped it. But it doesn't take a whole lot to destroy an automatic transmission without fluid in it. So I'm going to go down here, replace a little plastic clip, put some fluid back in it and see what happens. I did recommend that she take it to I did recommend that she actually just have it towed all the way to the Jiffy Lube, since they have the machine to cycle all 15 quarts, I believe it is, through the transmission, instead of me just pouring some bottles in the side of it. And letting that mix with the burnt fluid that's already in there. But she has asked me to just top it off and put the clip back on there, and so that's what we're going to do today. And we'll see what happens, and hopefully the fluid that's in there is not burnt too bad, where it won't cause any problems by mixing with the new fluid we're going to put in it. There, she was losing fluid when she left the house last night, so there's drops of it in that mud hole there. Right, so basically here's the part that caused the problem, and what's supposed to happen is, like this one over here, this little plastic thing is supposed to sit like this behind this little collar and over here, and hold this line in place. And what happened when I got to it last night, it was hanging like this, and this line was allowed to back out. I shoved it back in here, but it basically dumped fluid all over the place. So we have, the parts store didn't have another one of these, but she wants me to go ahead and replace the fitting itself, and we're going to reuse the old plastic piece, but we're going to wrap hose clamps around it to reinforce it and keep it from spreading open and falling off again. Alright, so we are not going to use this, because when I shoved this in here last night to put it back so it would quit dripping and not be contaminated with mud and water and stuff when we moved it and had it towed, it's in there pretty good, and I'm not going to worry about it. If it doesn't leak, then we'll just take this back and get a refund on it. But I did notice one thing, just out of curiosity. I grabbed this one and pulled it down and looked at it, and this just falls off with just the slightest little bit of pressure, and it's got a crack in it too. So this is obviously a part that Ford should not have cheaped out on. But since we're not going to replace the brass, since this is in here pretty good, I'm just going to take, where'd it go, a hose clamp here and wrap around the ends to give something on the back side of this open C to hold it in place. Alright, so there we go. So basically the idea is that the hose clamp will hold these fins into the position they're supposed to be in. This back side's okay, that lip will catch and not back out. But I guess Ford, they probably should have reinforced this with a metal shim or something out of the factory, even if they were going to use plastic. But the hose clamp here ought to hold it into position, and we'll just keep an eye on things. But it seems like it's in there pretty good. I don't think it's going to move. So we'll go ahead and get the other side taken care of here. Another thing I noticed was that this and this one were on the bottom, so that gravity itself could eventually make them fall. So I'm going to flip them around and put the open side facing down so that gravity will actually help hold them on. Alrighty, so now we have this one that failed, and this one that had not yet failed but was on the way because it was cracked as well. Both secured in position with some hose clamps so that they can't slip off, and flipped over so that the open side is facing gravity instead of the other way around. And so now we gotta, I'm gonna see if I can push it up on some ramps and find the transmission fill bolt and replace the fluid.
So I know this is an abrupt change of scenery, but I just wanted to close the video out and explain what was going on. It's now 2 days later, and while I was working on the Explorer for my mom, there was an accident somewhere else in the yard, and my 2-year-old little girl got some pretty serious lacerations on her feet, and so I had to stop what I was doing and rush her to the hospital, where she got 12 stitches. So she didn't lose any toes. She's still got, she's fine. She got some stitches, painkillers, and antibiotics. But anyway, I wanted to show you guys what had happened to my mom's Ford Explorer, so that you guys could then go and look at your vehicles, Ford or not, and see if they have a similar setup for connecting the transmission to the radiator, because there's separate channels in the radiator. One of them is for antifreeze coolant, for cooling the engine. And then some of the channels are for transmission fluid, to cool the transmission fluid, because it's got an automatic transmission. And those little plastic clips basically hold that line in place. And even without the clip, the metal fitting has some little one-way tabs that catch on a lip on the line itself. So even without that little clip, that line should stay put in there. But that clip is the first line of defense to keep it from shifting. But what had happened was that little plastic clip had cracked and fallen down, and then that little lip and that fitting wiggled around enough to mash in those tabs and pop out, dumped all of her transmission fluid on the ground. And so that was the end of that. Now, on that vehicle in particular, there is no fill port per se. There is, but it's a pain in the ass to get to. Basically, on my pickup, which has a manual, you have a drain bolt in the bottom and a fill port about halfway up. And if you want to add fluid, you take out the fill bolt, you pour fluid into the side bolt until fluid runs back out, and then you put the bolt back in. On the Ford Taurus, which has an automatic, I just pour it down the dipstick. With that Explorer, there's no dipstick or any access to the transmission from the top. There's no fill bolt in the side. If you want to add fluid to that transmission on the Ford Explorer, there's one bolt in the bottom of the pan, and in the middle of that bolt there's a Torx head bolt that you remove. And then there's a special fitting designed to thread into that hole, and then you take a suction gun and you basically manually suction a little bit of fluid out of a bottle, slide the hose up over the nipple created by that adapter, push that fluid in, disconnect it, suck some more out of the bottle, and push it in, and rinse and repeat until the fluid runs back out. And the accident aside, I was actually looking around to see if I could find like an ink pen or something that would thread up in there and work good enough, but we didn't have a suction gun. And that, I was telling my mom, I was like, this is going to be a pain in the ass regardless, because we're going to have to either go buy a suction gun or find some way to manually put probably 6 or 7 quarts worth of fluid upward into a hole in the bottom of the transmission pan without spilling a third of it all over the ground. And then my little girl got hurt, and they just decided they'll just, since I fixed the faulty connection, they're just going to have it towed and have somebody else fill the transmission properly at a shop. But I just wanted to update you guys and let you know what was going on and close out this video. And hopefully, like I said, if you guys have an automatic transmission, go check and see if it has a similar sort of setup. And if it's got those stupid little plastic clips, put a hose clamp or some Gorilla Tape or something around it, so that even if it starts to crack from age, it doesn't just fall off. Or at least flip it around where the open side is facing down, so gravity kind of helps keep it in place. But anyway, if you guys have any comments, questions, concerns, or suggestions, please feel free to post them in the comment section below. And as always, this is Marcus out. Y'all have a good